Unilever is a global giant headquartered in London. It operates in over 119 countries. Thus, with accountability, Unilever is organized with 5 distinct business groups. The first one is business well-being, personal care, home care, nutrition, and also ice cream, which is currently in its final stage of operational separation. The stakeholder ecosystem. This massive operation serves a vast ecosystem of stakeholders. Their customers range from retail giants like Walmart to billions of daily customers. However, their most critical stakeholders are the affected communities where they operate. The Unilever immense scale has brought intense global security or scrutiny. This brings us the genocide issue in 2021. Ben & Jerry's independent board stopped sales in the occupied Palestinian terrorists, calling it is consistent with their values, and the Unilever's response, they bypassed the board and selling the Israel business right to a local license. This move to lead an allegation of complicity. A 2025 UN report named Unilever as a part of the corporate machinery and sustaining an economy of occupations, with critics arguing that tax payments to the state amid to Gaza conflict constitute involvement in the genocide acts. In 2026, Unilever enforced a global hiring pause due to the challenge stemming from the Middle East conflict. More significantly, the company is now spinning off to the ice cream divisions. Analysts see this as a clear move to distance the parent company from the political activism of the Ben & Jerry's issues. So, as Unilever moves forward, the world is watching. Can a global giant truly separate its profit from the politics of the region itself? The battle between Unilever and its subsidiary, Ben & Jerry, it is the ultimate of the corporate ethics. It started when the ice cream maker refused to sell in the occupied Palestinian terrorists, sparking a massive legal war with its own parent company, which is with the Unilever. We can see that this case hits the business integrity hard. Why? Because this by bypassing its own subsidiary value to protect the profit, Unilever show a value gap. It proves that independent boards often have a little power against a multinational bottom line, damaging trust with socially conscious consumers worldwide. The effect of human rights is even deeper, because we can see a 2025 UN report warned the companies staying in this region risk being part of an economy of genocide. Societally, this turned off a pin of ice cream into a political statement, fueling global boycotts and forcing everyday shoppers to choose a side in a global conflict.
I'm going to discuss the Unilever decision-making process. So I'll break down the dilemma itself, who made the key decision, as well as whether the process was transparent and responsible. So first, the dilemma. Unilever was actually caught between two choices. On one hand, they had made a clear promise back in the year of 2000 to respect Ben & Jerry's independent social mission, which that mission now required speaking up against the war in Gaza and ending sales in illegal Israeli settlement. On the other hand, honoring that promise would basically mean risking political backlash, losing a pro-Israel investor and customer, as well as potentially hurting profit. So the question is very simple: uphold a written promise and do the right thing, or protect the financial interests and silence a human right voice. Now, who actually made the decision here? It was not a joint and collaborative process. The decision were actually made unilaterally by Unilever top management, specifically CEO Alan Job, when he set the public line that Unilever was fully committed to Israel and would not support any boycott. Where was Ben & Jerry's independent board, the one that Unilever promised to protect? They were actually not consulted at all. In fact, they were completely excluded and overruled every single time. So the question now, was this process transparent and responsible? Obviously, it is not, because it was closed and non-transparent at the first place. Ben & Jerry's board tried 4 separate times to issue a public statement, but Unilever blocked them all behind closed door, and we only know about this because of court document, not because Unilever was open about it. And second, it was also coercive. When the board didn't stay silent, Unilever threatened to dissolve the board, sue its own member, and even remove the CEO of Ben & Jerry's without the board approval. And finally, they also circumvented the problem rather than addressing it ethically. When the board voted to stop sale in occupied territories, Unilever didn't sit down to discuss it. They simply sold the Israeli business license to a local distributor, calling it a financial operational decision, even though it completely undermined the board ethical stance. So that is basically a rough idea of the decision-making process under Unilever.
Now, moving on, we will see how Unilever's questionable decisions affect its ethical code. We begin with the stakeholders. Firstly, the Ben & Jerry's independent board was directly impacted. Their authority was undermined, and their ability to uphold the company's social mission was effectively removed. Secondly, its employees and leadership were affected as well. The removal of leadership without the board's approval created uncertainty and sent a strong message that taking ethical stances or positions could carry professional risks, and that's just not right. Thirdly, the consumers and the public were also impacted in ways that the customers supported Ben & Jerry's activism and their stance towards the Palestinian plight. When those values were overridden, it can lead to a loss of trust and credibility in the eyes of the public. Not forsaking that such decisions impacts the public support towards the boycott of Israel economy. When humanitarian issues that demand a clear stance becomes something that could be silenced, it poses a question towards the overall morality code of an organization. And of course, the shareholders and investors were definitely impacted by this, where some may have supported risk-averse decisions where some may support this type of risky decisions. In others, especially those focus on investing on more ethical investments, especially something that involves taking a stance towards genocide, may view these actions as unethical and negative. Next, let's look at whether important ethical principles were actually upheld in this situation. First, we have the principle of honesty. For a company that publicly promotes ethical responsibility and social values, transparency is extremely important. However, in this case, honesty seems questionable. While Unilever presented itself as a supportive of ethical advocacy, internally it seems like it blocked public statements and reframed decisions in ways that were not fully transparent. This creates a disconnect between the company's public image and its internal actions. Moving on to justice. Here, fairness also appears to be a bit lacking. Ben & Jerry's independent board was supposed to have authority over its own social mission, yet we see that it was not given a fair opportunity to exercise that role. Instead, major decisions were made unilaterally by Unilever, creating a clear imbalance of power and raising concerns about whether the board's independence was genuinely respected. And then we have accountability. Accountability is another major concern. Key decisions were made by senior leadership, including CEO Alan Jobe, but there was little open engagement or a clear justification provided to the stakeholders involved. The reported use of pressure and threats also weakened the idea of responsible and accountable leadership. We must move on next to the final part of our discussion, which is applying ethical theories to evaluate these actions. First, utilitarianism, which focuses on the outcomes and overall consequences of the actions of the company. From Unilever's perspective, these decisions may have been intended to protect the business's stability and image, plus its shareholder interests. However, there are negative consequences such as reputational damage, loss of public interest, trust, and the suppression of ethical advocacy, which is the most important part. It may outweigh those benefits. Because of that, from a utilitarian perspective, the actions can be seen as ethically questionable. Next, we have deontology, which focuses on duties and moral principles rather than outcomes. Unilever had a duty to respect Ben & Jerry's independent social mission and to act in good faith. By overriding the board and allegedly using coercive measures, the company failed to uphold those responsibilities. So, from a deontological perspective, the actions could be considered unethical. Lastly, we have virtue ethics, which looks at more of a moral character and values. This theory asks whether the actions reflected qualities such as integrity, fairness, honesty, and courage. And in this case, there seems to be a gap between Unilever's stated values and its actual conduct. From a virtue ethics perspective, the decisions do not reflect the character expected of a socially responsible corporation. So, in conclusion, we must ponder whether Unilever's decision had significant impacts on its multiple stakeholders, and it did not fully uphold the key ethical principles that they somehow always flaunt to have practiced. It is difficult to justify under these magical ethical theories, and although the decisions may be understandable from a business standpoint, ethically, we raise the question whether the serious concern about corporate governance, accountability, and authenticity of corporate social responsibility bears any weight to this so-called successful corporation. And that is all from me. Thank you.
Next, let us take a look at the decision-making process by Unilever from an Islamic ethical perspective. From an Islamic ethical perspective, Unilever's decision does not align with key values, particularly Amanah, Adil, and Maslahah. First, Amanah or trust. Unilever had made a clear and binding decision to respect Ben & Jerry's independent social mission. However, by excluding the board from the decision-making process and overriding its authority, this trust was clearly violated. An Amanah-based approach will require Unilever to honour its promise not just legally, but also ethically. This means generally involving the board in the discussion, respecting its decision, and ensuring that prior commitments are not being ignored when they become inconvenient. Second, Adil, which means justice and fairness. The decision-making process was neither transparent nor balanced. It was carried out unilaterally with the board being sidelined, pressured, and silent. This reflects an imbalance of power and failure to ensure fairness. A just approach would involve inclusive and good faith consultation where all parties are given a real opportunity to contribute. It will also require respecting differing views and ensuring the decisions are made without coercion, which was clearly not reflected in this case. Third, Maslahah or public interest. This issue goes beyond business. It involves human rights and societal impact. However, Unilever chose to prioritize financial and political interests over this broader concern. Guided by Maslahah, the company should have carefully weighed the wider consequences of its action, including its impact on public trust and social justice. A more ethical response would aim to balance profitability with responsibility, potentially seeking a solution that upholds human rights while managing business risk. In conclusion, Unilever action demonstrates breach of trust, lack of justice, and neglect of public interest. A more ethical response, guided by Islamic value, would have been transparent, consultative, and principled, even in the face of financial or political pressure.
Based on the ethical issues identified in the Unilever case, several ethical recommendations can be proposed to ensure that the company acts more responsibly in the conflict-related situation. Firstly, Unilever should respect independent governance. Unilever should respect the autonomy of Ben & Jerry's independent board. The company should honour internal agreements and governance structures. Instead of overriding the board, Unilever should engage in meaningful dialogue. Therefore, ethical governance requires trust, accountability, and fairness. This helps preserve corporate integrity and stakeholder confidence. Secondly, responsible disengagement from conflict zone. Companies should avoid direct or indirect involvement in human rights violation. Unilever should suspend or withdraw operations from conflict-affected regions if risks cannot be mitigated. Continuing operation through third-party licensing still creates ethical concerns. Therefore, responsible disengagement reduces complicity in human rights abuse. Thirdly, strengthen supply chain ethics. Ethical responsibility includes suppliers and business partners. Unilever should conduct stricter human rights audits, improve traceability of raw materials and sourcing practices. Immediately disengage from supplies linked to forced labor. Therefore, ensures the accountability throughout the supply chain. Fourthly, ensure transparency and open communication. Companies should communicate honestly about humanitarian issues. Unilever should not suppress public statements from subsidiaries. Open communication strengthens accountability and public trust. In line with that, transparency demonstrates genuine ethical commitment. Lastly, support affected communities. Unilever should contribute to humanitarian aid and relief efforts. Establish support mechanisms for affected communities. Therefore, encourage socially responsible initiatives instead of penalizing them. It is reflect commitment to social responsibility and public welfare.